The first crack of gunfire echoed through the snow-laden Wyoming night just as Emma Reynolds's water broke. She clutched her swollen belly, breath steaming in the frigid December air of 1878, and urged her exhausted horse forward. 3 days on the run from her late husband's debtors had left her with nowhere to go, and a child fighting to be born in the middle of the worst blizzard in years. "Just a little further," Emma whispered, though she had no destination in mind. The nearest town was still hours away, and the snowfall was getting heavier, covering her tracks but also obscuring any path to safety. Her mare stumbled, legs trembling beneath her. Emma knew the animal couldn't go much farther. Another contraction seized her, stronger than the last, and she bit back a scream. The cold bit through her threadbare coat as she slid from the saddle, her legs buckling as they hit the ground. Emma led her horse toward a small cluster of pines, hoping for some shelter from the howling wind. She tied the mare to a low, hanging branch and sank to her knees as another contraction tore through her. The snow was already soaking through her skirts. She was going to die here, she realized, and her baby would never take its first breath. Miles away, Thaddeus O'Malley stoked the fire in his modest cabin, his 6-year-old son Jacob peering out the frost-covered window at the worsening storm. "Pa, do you think the cattle will be okay?" the boy asked, his small face pinched with worry beyond his years. "They'll be fine in the barn, Jake," Thaddeus assured him, running a hand through his dark hair. "Warm as we are in here." 4 years a widower, Thaddeus had built a quiet life for himself and his son on their small ranch. It wasn't much, a few dozen cattle, some chickens, and a sturdy cabin he'd built with his own hands, but it was theirs. The nearest neighbors were 5 miles away, the nearest town 15. They were used to being alone, especially during the harsh Wyoming winters. Jacob suddenly pressed his face closer to the window. "Pa, I see something moving out there." Thaddeus joined his son at the window, squinting through the swirling snow. At first he saw nothing, then caught a flicker of movement, something dark against the white landscape. "Stay inside," he ordered, already reaching for his coat and rifle. "Bar the door behind me." The wind nearly knocked him flat when he stepped outside. Thaddeus pulled his scarf tighter around his face and trudged forward, the snow already up to his knees. He'd gone about 50 yards when he heard a horse's frightened whinny cutting through the wind. Following the sound, he pushed forward until he made out the shape of a horse, and beside it, something huddled in the snow. When he drew closer, he realized it was a woman collapsed on her side, her face deathly pale, one hand clutching her round belly. "Madam," Thaddeus dropped to his knees beside her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing pain-glazed hazel eyes. "My baby," she gasped. "Please." "My baby's coming." Thaddeus didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, alarmed at how little she weighed despite her pregnant state. Her horse was too exhausted to carry them, so he left it tied to the tree, knowing he'd have to come back for it later if the storm allowed. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him over the wind. "My cabin's not far." The journey back seemed endless, his muscles screaming under the woman's weight and against the force of the blizzard. When the cabin finally came into view, relief flooded through him. The door flew open before he reached it, Jacob's small face appearing in the gap. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the woman in his father's arms. "Pa, who is she?" "Someone who needs our help," Thaddeus said, shouldering past his son into the warmth of the cabin. "Quick now, Jake. Put more wood on the fire and fetch the extra blankets from the chest." Thaddeus laid the woman gently on his bed. Her face was contorted in pain, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Madam, can you tell me your name?" "Emma," she whispered between gritted teeth. "Emma Reynolds." "I'm Thaddeus O'Malley. That's my boy, Jacob. "You're having a baby, Emma." "Too early," she gasped. "Not due for 3 more weeks." Jacob returned with an armful of blankets, his young face solemn. "Is she going to die, Pa, like Ma did?" The question struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. His wife had died in childbirth 4 years ago, leaving him alone with their 2-year-old son. He'd never thought he'd find himself in this position again, and yet here he was. "No," he said firmly, as much to convince himself as his son. "She's not going to die. We're going to help her." He turned to Emma. "I've helped birth calves and foals, madam. I can help you too, if you'll let me." Emma nodded weakly, another contraction seizing her. "No choice," she managed. "Jake, I need you to heat water, lots of it, and bring me the cleanest cloths we have." The boy nodded and hurried to obey. Thaddeus removed Emma's snow-soaked coat and boots, covering her with blankets. When Jacob returned with the water and cloths, Thaddeus sent him to sit by the fire, facing away from them. "It's not proper for a boy your age to see this," he explained gently. "But I might need you to fetch things for me, so stay alert." The birth was difficult. Emma was weak from cold and hunger, and Thaddeus was operating on fragmented knowledge and desperate prayer. But just as dawn broke through the storm clouds, a baby's cry filled the cabin. "A girl," Thaddeus announced, wrapping the tiny, red-faced infant in a clean cloth. "A healthy baby girl." He placed the newborn on Emma's chest, and she gazed down at her daughter with tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We made it." Jacob, who had been stoically facing the fire for hours, turned at the sound of the baby's cry. He approached the bed cautiously, eyes wide with wonder. "She's so small," he marveled. "Was I that small, Pa?" "Even smaller," Thaddeus said, ruffling his son's hair. "You were born early, too." Emma's eyelids were drooping with exhaustion. Thaddeus gently took the baby, allowing Emma to sleep. As he cradled the infant, a strange feeling washed over him, a mixture of grief for his lost wife and something new, something he couldn't quite name. "What will you call her?" Jacob asked Emma. "I don't know yet," she murmured, already drifting off. "Need to think." "You rest now," Thaddeus said. "Everything else can wait." After Emma fell asleep, Thaddeus bundled up against the storm once more to retrieve her horse and their own livestock. The blizzard had abated somewhat, though the snow was still falling steadily. When he returned to the cabin, Jacob was sitting beside the bed, watching over Emma and the baby with a serious expression that made him look older than his 6 years. "Pa," he said as Thaddeus stomped the snow from his boots. She was crying in her sleep. Thaddeus sighed, hanging his coat by the fire to dry. "She's been through a lot, son, like Ma, in some ways." Thaddeus crouched beside his son. "But your Ma had me to take care of her." "I don't know if Miss Reynolds has anyone." Jacob considered this, then nodded decisively. "Then we'll have to take care of her." The simplicity of a child's solution to an adult problem made Thaddeus smile despite the gravity of the situation. "Yes, we will. At least until she's strong enough to tell us what she needs." That evening, when Emma woke, Thaddeus had soup waiting. He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and handed her the steaming bowl. The baby was sleeping in a makeshift cradle he'd quickly constructed from a drawer, lined with soft blankets. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice stronger than before, "for everything, if you hadn't found me." "No need to think about that," Thaddeus cut in. "You're safe now." Emma took a spoonful of soup, closing her eyes as the warmth spread through her. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to." Thaddeus settled into a chair beside the bed. "But I do need to know if someone's looking for you. You were a long way from anywhere in that storm." Emma's face clouded. "My husband died 3 months ago, left nothing but debts to some dangerous men when they realized I couldn't pay." She shuddered. "I ran, had nowhere specific to go, just away." "Those gunshots I heard last night," Emma nodded. They found me. I thought I'd lost them in the storm, but they were closer than I realized. My horse spooked at the sound and bolted. That's how I ended up so far off the trail. Thaddeus's jaw tightened. Then they might still be looking. Probably, Emma admitted, glancing anxiously at her sleeping daughter. I should leave as soon as I'm able. I won't bring trouble to your door. You're not going anywhere until you're healed, Thaddeus said firmly. And certainly not with a newborn in this weather. We're 15 miles from town, and the snow won't clear for weeks. But if they find me here, then they'll have to deal with me. His hand unconsciously moved to the rifle propped beside his chair. This is my land. Nobody threatens a woman and child on my land. Jacob, who had been quietly playing with wooden blocks by the fire, looked up. We'll protect you, Miss Reynolds. Pa's the best shot in the territory. That's what Mr. Jenkins says. Emma managed a small smile at the boy's earnest declaration. You're very brave, Jacob. What about your family? Thaddeus asked. Is there anyone who could help you? Emma shook her head. My parents died years ago. I was an only child. It was just me and Robert, and now. Her voice trailed off as she looked at her daughter. Then you'll stay here until spring, Thaddeus decided. By then the passes will be clear and we can figure out what's next. The baby began to fuss, and Emma reached for her. As she settled the infant to nurse, Jacob watched curiously before Thaddeus gently directed him to his own bed in the corner of the cabin's main room. Pa, Jacob whispered as Thaddeus tucked him in. I like having them here. It feels less empty. Thaddeus felt a tightness in his chest. The cabin had felt empty since Sarah died, no matter how he tried to fill it with work and purpose. Get some sleep, son. We've got chores to do tomorrow, storm or no storm. Days passed, stretching into weeks. Emma grew stronger, and her daughter, whom she named Clara, thrived. The O'Malley's cabin was small but snug against the winter cold, and they fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Thaddeus would rise before dawn to tend to the livestock, returning to find Emma preparing breakfast, Clara bundled in a sling across her chest. Jacob, normally shy around strangers, had taken to following Emma around the cabin, asking endless questions about the baby and offering to help in his childish way. One evening, as they sat around the fire after supper, Jacob looked up from the picture book Emma was reading to him. Miss Reynolds, how come Clara doesn't have a pa like I do? Emma's cheeks flushed. Well, she did, but he died before she was born. So she won't ever know him. That's sad. Jacob frowned. But she has us now, right, Pa? We can be her family too. Thaddeus cleared his throat, avoiding Emma's gaze. That's not how it works, son. Miss Reynolds and Clara will need to find their own way once spring comes. But why can't they stay here? We've got room, and you smile more since they came. The innocent observation hung in the air between the adults. Emma broke the silence first. Your father has been very kind to take us in when we needed help, Jacob, but we wouldn't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Thaddeus said quietly, but Jake's right, you'll need to decide what's best for you and Clara when the time comes. That night, long after Jacob had fallen asleep, Emma found Thaddeus sitting alone by the dying fire, staring into the flames. She settled into the chair opposite him, Clara sleeping against her shoulder. I've been thinking, she said softly, about what happens when the snow melts. Thaddeus looked up, his face half in shadow. And? Those men who were after me, they're not the type to give up easily. They'll keep looking, and not just for the money. Thaddeus's expression hardened. What do you mean? Emma swallowed hard. Robert was involved in things, illegal things. I didn't know the extent until after he died. These men think I know where he hid something valuable. I don't, but they won't believe that. So running won't solve anything. No, Emma admitted. They'll find me eventually, wherever I go. Thaddeus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then we need a different plan. You can't spend your life looking over your shoulder, especially not with Clara to raise. What other choice do I have? You could stay, Thaddeus said, the words coming out before he could stop them. Here, I mean, not just until spring. Emma's eyes widened. Thaddeus, I couldn't hear me out, he continued. This place is remote, hard to find if you don't know where to look. I've got enough land and cattle to support us all. Jacob adores you and the baby, and he hesitated. I've grown accustomed to having you both here. Is that all it is? Being accustomed? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thaddeus met her gaze. No, he admitted. It's more than that. Much more. Emma looked down at Clara, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the dangers waiting in the world beyond their sheltered valley. I've come to care for you and Jacob too, she confessed. But I won't put you in danger because of my husband's mistakes. Let me worry about that, Thaddeus said. I've spent 4 years keeping my son safe. I can keep all of us safe. Before Emma could respond, a noise outside caught their attention, the distinctive crunch of footsteps in snow, too heavy to be an animal. Thaddeus was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Wake Jacob, he whispered. Take him and Clara to the root cellar. There's a trapdoor under the rug in the pantry. Emma's heart pounded as she gently shook Jacob awake and guided him, still half asleep, to the hidden cellar door. The boy seemed to understand the urgency without explanation, taking his place beside Emma in the cramped, cold space beneath the cabin. Above them they heard Thaddeus moving, the sound of the front door opening, then men's voices, harsh and demanding. Looking for a woman, one said. Pregnant woman traveling alone. Heard she might have passed this way. Haven't seen anyone, came Thaddeus's calm reply. Been snowed in since December. You boys are the first travelers I've seen. Mind if we take a look around, just to be sure? There was a pause, then Thaddeus's voice, deceptively casual. Actually, I do mind. My son's sleeping, and I don't take kindly to strangers barging into my home in the middle of the night. We're not asking permission, Cowboy. Emma held her breath, clutching Clara tighter as heavy footsteps entered the cabin. Jacob pressed against her side, trembling but silent. They could hear the men moving around above them, opening doors, rifling through belongings. Satisfied? Thaddeus asked after several minutes of searching. For now, the first voice replied. But we'll be watching this place. She couldn't have gotten far in that storm, and this is the only homestead for miles. Then you're wasting your time. Good night, gentlemen. The door closed and silence fell. Emma counted to 100 before the trapdoor opened, revealing Thaddeus's face, grim in the lantern light. They're gone, he said, helping them out. But they'll be back. I should leave, Emma said, cradling Clara. Tonight, while they're still far enough away, and go where? Into the snow with a newborn. Thaddeus shook his head. No, they're expecting that. We need to outsmart them. Jacob, now fully awake, looked up at his father with trust. What are we going to do, Pa? Thaddeus ruffled his son's hair. We're going to protect our family, Jake. He turned to Emma. I meant what I said before they arrived. Stay, not just to hide, but because I want you to. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough, Thaddeus said simply. I know you're brave and strong. I know my son lights up around you in a way I haven't seen since his mother died. And I know that when I look at you, I see a future I didn't think I'd have again. The next morning, Thaddeus rode into town despite the dangerous conditions. He returned late in the day with the sheriff and 3 deputies. Emma, he said as he stomped the snow from his boots, this is Sheriff Monroe. He's agreed to help us. The sheriff, a weathered man with kind eyes, nodded to Emma. Mrs. Reynolds, Thaddeus here has explained your situation. These men threatening you, they're wanted in 3 territories. We've been tracking them for months. You believe me? Emma asked, surprised. Your husband's associates are well known to us, the sheriff explained. Robert Reynolds may have been involved in their operations, but we have no reason to believe you were. What we do need is your help to catch them. The plan was simple but dangerous. Emma would appear to flee the cabin, drawing out the men who were undoubtedly watching from the surrounding hills. The sheriff and his deputies would be waiting to ambush them. I don't like it, Thaddeus argued. Using Emma as bait, it's the quickest way to end this, Emma interrupted. I'm willing to do it. The trap was set for the following day. As dawn broke, Emma, with Clara bundled against her chest, mounted her horse and rode slowly away from the cabin, taking the trail toward town. Thaddeus and Jacob remained behind, seemingly going about their morning chores. She had ridden less than a mile when she heard them horses approaching fast from behind. Emma urged her mare forward, heart pounding, praying the sheriff was in position. The first shots rang out just as she reached the narrow pass between two rocky outcroppings. Emma ducked low over her horse's neck, shielding Clara with her body. More gunfire followed the sheriff and his men engaging the pursuers. Then silence, broken only by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Emma turned, ready to flee if necessary, but it was Thaddeus who appeared around the bend, his face tight with worry. It's over, he said, pulling his horse alongside hers. They got all three of them. The sheriff says there might be more, but they were the leaders. Without them, the rest of the gang will likely scatter. Relief washed over Emma, so powerful she swayed in the saddle. Thaddeus steadied her with a strong hand. Let's go home, he said softly, home. The word echoed in Emma's mind as they rode back to the cabin, where Jacob was waiting anxiously on the porch despite the cold. When he saw them approaching, the boy let out a whoop of joy and ran to meet them, heedless of the snow soaking his boots. You're back. Are the bad men gone? Is Clara okay? Emma dismounted carefully, making sure Clara was still sleeping soundly in her sling. We're all fine, Jacob, and yes, the bad men won't bother us any more. So you can stay. The hope in his voice was unmistakable. Emma looked at Thaddeus, who had dismounted beside her. That depends on your father. Thaddeus took her free hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Stay, he said simply. Not because you need protection or because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because we want you here, because I want you here. We'll share our fire, Jacob added solemnly, repeating the words he'd said the night they found Emma in the snow. That's what Pa always says we should do for people who need help. Emma felt something shift inside her, the fear and uncertainty that had driven her for months finally giving way to hope. She squeezed Thaddeus's hand. Yes, she said, I'll stay. Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the earth. The cabin, which had once felt too small for the growing family, was expanded with a new room for Jacob and a nursery for Clara. On a warm May evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Thaddeus and Emma stood on the porch, watching Jacob chase fireflies in the yard, Clara giggling in Emma's arms. I never thought I'd have this again, Thaddeus said, his arm around Emma's waist. After Sarah died, I was certain that part of my life was over. I never thought I'd have it at all, Emma admitted. With Robert, it was always about the next scheme, the next town. I never felt settled, safe. Thaddeus turned to face her, taking her free hand in his. I want you to always feel safe here, Emma, with me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. I know it hasn't been very long, but I love you. I want us to be a real family, you, me, Jacob, and Clara. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Are you asking me to marry you, Thaddeus O'Malley? I am, he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness in his eyes. What do you say? Yes, Emma whispered, leaning forward to kiss him as Clara squirmed between them. Yes. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, Jacob proudly serving as best man, Clara dressed in a gown Emma had sewn from her own wedding dress. The entire community turned out to witness the union of the quiet rancher and the woman he'd found in the snow. That night, as they lay together in their bed, the sounds of their sleeping children drifting from the adjoining rooms, Thaddeus traced the curve of Emma's face with his fingertips. "I keep thinking about that night," he said softly. "If Jacob hadn't seen you from the window." "Or if you hadn't come looking," Emma added. "So many things had to happen exactly right for us to find each other." "Maybe it wasn't chance," Thaddeus suggested. "Maybe we were meant to find each other, to heal each other." Emma rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I think you're right. Out of all the terrible things that happened, something beautiful emerged. Years passed. The O'Malley ranch prospered, expanding to become one of the most successful in the territory. Jacob grew into a fine young man, with his father's quiet strength and his stepmother's compassion. Clara blossomed into a spirited girl who loved horses as much as her father did. And there were other children, 2 sons and another daughter, filling the once quiet cabin with laughter and chaos and love. On cold winter nights, when the snow piled high against the windowsills, Thaddeus and Emma would tell their children the story of how they met of a desperate woman, a kindly cowboy, and a little boy who insisted on sharing their fire with a stranger in need. "That's when I knew your father was a good man," Emma would say, her eyes meeting Thaddeus's across the room. "When he carried me through that blizzard, never once thinking of the burden. And that's when I knew your mother was extraordinary," Thaddeus would add. "Bringing new life into the world under the harshest circumstances, never once giving up hope." What they didn't say, what they didn't need to say, was how that single act of kindness had grown into a love that sustained them through all the seasons of their lives together. A love born in the snow but hardy enough to weather any storm. In the end, it wasn't just the fire they shared, but their lives, their dreams, their hearts finding in each other the home they'd both been searching for all along.